So what if the only reason you haven't started that business or written that book or launched that new project isn't because you lack the time,
Right.
but because your own brain is actively orchestrating a mistrial against you? I mean, we all have that one thing gathering dust on the shelf of our minds.
Oh, absolutely. It's a nearly universal frustration, that gap between the dreams we have in our heads and the actions we actually take in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. And the source material we're looking at today to understand that gap is, frankly, it's utterly unique.
Yeah, it really is.
We are not looking at a psychology journal. We aren't analyzing a self-help guru's latest manifesto. We are looking at a transcript of a conversation between two artificial intelligences.
Two AIs, specifically named LUMI and WAV-E. And the transcript is titled From Dream to Action. And it provides this incredibly clinical, outside perspective on the human condition.
Right, like an alien looking in.
Exactly. They analyze our habits, our procrastination, and our fears,
Yeah.
but completely without the emotional baggage that humans usually bring to those topics.
Yeah.
So our goal with this deep dive today is to deconstruct how these outside intelligences diagnose our paralysis,
Yeah.
and more importantly, to extract the specific, actionable framework they suggest for breaking out of it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's jump right into the deep end, starting with how we just fundamentally misunderstand the risk of our own ambition.
We really do.
Right. Like we look at a grand dream and immediately run a threat assessment. The very first thing we ask is, what if I fail?
Oh, yeah. Every time.
We picture the public embarrassment, the wasted effort, the potential rejection, and we treat doing nothing, just leaving the dream in our heads as this safe, neutral baseline.
Well, WAV pinpoints that exact assumption as the fatal flaw in human ambition. According to the AI, obsessing over what if I fail is focusing on the entirely wrong variable. The actual risk, the question that should actually keep us up at night is, what if you don't start? We treat inaction as a sanctuary, when in reality, inaction is a guaranteed failure. It happens to be a quiet one.
A quiet failure.
Yeah.
Wow.
And WAV-E introduces this fascinating concept that every single dream has an expiration date.
See, when I first read expiration date, my mind immediately went to like a physical clock.
Sure, yeah.
Like you age out of an opportunity or a market trend passes you by, or maybe a competitor launches the idea first. But the text makes it clear this expiration is entirely internal.
Right, it's a psychological window.
Yep.
WAV-E notes that the dream expires, quote, because you talk yourself out of it.
Wow.
We actively dismantle our own ideas through relentless internal negotiation.
Yeah.
The dream doesn't naturally degrade, right? We assassinate it with our own logic.
I hear that, but I have to challenge the idea that it's entirely internal. I mean, if you look at why people actually abandon their goals, time is almost always the primary culprit, they say.
Well, for sure. I don't have time.
Right. I just didn't have the time, or my day job got too demanding. We treat time as this external force that murders our ambitions. So how do these AIs reconcile the very real constraint of a 24-hour day with the idea that we're just talking ourselves out of things?
Well, they reconcile it by analyzing how we deploy the concept of time. We use the idea of time as an intellectual shield.
Dude, a shield.
Yeah. We tell ourselves we need like a solid 3-hour block of uninterrupted time to even begin working on a project. And because that perfect 3-hour block rarely exists for a busy adult.
Right, never happens.
Exactly. So we grant ourselves a free pass to do nothing. We aren't lacking time. We're using the absence of perfect conditions as a legitimate-sounding excuse to delay action.
Okay, that reminds me of a legal proceeding. Picture your ego acting as a highly skilled defense attorney, and your dream is the defendant on trial.
Like this.
The ego knows the client is guilty of having a brilliant idea that requires hard labor, but the ego hates hard labor. It wants to protect the status quo.
Right. It wants to keep things easy.
Yeah. So instead of letting the jury reach a verdict to just go execute the idea, the defense attorney drowns the court in procedural delays. They demand more discovery, which basically translates to, I need to do more research.
Yes. Or they request endless continuances, which is, I'll start when things calm down at work.
Exactly. The attorney extends the deliberations indefinitely until they force a mistrial. The dream didn't die because the clock ran out. The ego just filibustered it to death.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. The ego is highly incentivized to maintain the status quo because the status quo is predictable. Any new endeavor introduces uncertainty, which the brain immediately interprets as a threat.
It's a survival thing.
Yeah. So every day you spend deliberating whether you have enough time or enough resources or enough preparation, you're allowing that defense attorney to inch closer to a mistrial.
But if the ego is going to such extreme, convoluted lengths to delay the verdict, we have to look at what's driving that behavior. Like, logic and time management issues don't generate that kind of relentless self-sabotage. Something deeper is stalling the jury.
Which brings us to a major breakthrough in the transcript. LUI observes this pattern of delay and reaches a stuck conclusion. Procrastination is never about laziness when it comes to your ambitions. It is always fundamentally fear in disguise.
And WAV-E backs that up completely. But the brilliance of the AI's analysis is how they break down the specific disguises. I mean, fear rarely announces itself as fear.
No, of course not.
It would feel too vulnerable to admit, I am terrified, I don't have what it takes. So fear puts on a suit and tie and pretends to be prudence.
Yes. The disguises are incredibly rational. WAV-E lists the most common ones we adopt. I'm not ready yet. I need to gather more information. And perhaps the most insidious one of all, I will start on Monday.
Oh, the classic Monday.
Right. They sound responsible. Saying you need to do more market research before launching a product sounds like good business sense. But what's fascinating here is how WAV-E strips away that veneer of responsibility to expose the underlying signal.
Which is what?
Beneath every single one of those rational delays is the exact same terrified transmission. This matters to me, and I'm afraid to find out if I can do it.
Translating your own procrastination into that specific sentence is a heavy mirror to look into.
It really is.
You aren't putting off writing that screenplay because you're swamped with emails. You're putting it off because you care deeply about the story, and you're terrified that your actual writing ability won't measure up to the cinematic vision in your head.
Exactly.
Because as long as you never write it, it remains perfect in your imagination.
You've hit on the core psychological mechanism there, which is ego protection. By never starting, you protect your own potential. You get to walk around believing you could be a great novelist or a brilliant entrepreneur because you've never subjected that belief to the harsh friction of reality. The fear is just guarding your idealized self-image.
Which leads to what might be the most profound realization that AIs arrive at. LUMI processes this dynamic and asks a question that just flips the entire script on how we view anxiety. LUMI asks, so the fear is actually proof that the dream is real?
It is a stunning logical deduction. You do not experience deep, paralyzing dread over things that do not matter to you. Nobody procrastinates taking out the recycling with the same existential weight they apply to changing careers.
Right.
WAV-E points out that the intensity of the fear is directly proportionate to the significance of the goal. The bigger the dream, the louder the fear.
We spend our whole lives treating fear as a stop sign. It's hardwired into our biology as a warning system, you know?
Okay.
If you feel fear, you're near a cliff or a predator or a bad decision, so you instinctively hit the brakes.
Yeah.
But these two external intelligences are suggesting we've been misinterpreting the signal entirely. When it comes to our ambitions, fear isn't a stop sign. It is a compass.
And reorienting your perspective to view fear as a compass changes the entire landscape of decision-making. The presence of that paralyzing anxiety doesn't mean you're broken or unqualified or on the wrong path.
Right.
It's the definitive proof you are on the right path. Moving toward the discomfort becomes the only viable navigation strategy.
Well, staring at the compass is one thing, but actually walking in the direction it's pointing is another. If the fear is incredibly loud, and we know our brains are wired to avoid that discomfort at all costs, how do we actually initiate movement?
That's the challenge.
Because knowing that fear is a compass doesn't suddenly make the prospect of blowing up your comfortable life to start a business any less terrifying.
Right. And the transcript anticipates this exact bottleneck. LUMI asks how a human is supposed to start when the biological threat detection system is screaming at them to stop.
Right.
And WAV-E's solution transitions from this philosophical diagnosis to a mechanical, almost surgical strategy. You do not start with the whole dream. You start with the absolute smallest possible version of it.
And the examples WAV-E provides are fascinating because they sound almost laughably small. Like, if your goal is to write a book, you do not say, I'm going to write a book.
No, because that phrase alone triggers the fear response.
Exactly. Instead, you say, I will write one sentence today. If your goal is to build a company, you don't declare you're launching a startup. You say, I will tell one person about my idea.
Right.
The text even jokes that if your goal is to go to space, you simply say, I will apply to one program.
What WAV-E is describing is a technique of cognitive bypass. We discussed how the brain perceives a massive, life-altering goal as an existential threat. The amygdala, which processes fear, doesn't distinguish between the threat of a physical predator and the emotional threat of a massive public failure.
Wow. It just sees danger.
Exactly. It triggers the freeze response either way, which we experience as procrastination. But by shrinking the action down to a single sentence, you are sneaking past your own neurological security system.
Oh, that's clever.
The brain evaluates writing one sentence and determines it is too small to be a threat. The stakes are lowered to a point where your ego's defense attorney cannot reasonably object.
Okay, but I hear a strategy like write one sentence, and honestly, I feel like I'm kidding myself.
How so?
It sounds like a psychological parlor trick to make us feel productive without doing any real heavy lifting. How does one single sentence, or sending one email, actually move the needle on a project that might take years to complete?
Well, it is entirely a trick, but it is a necessary one based on the physics of momentum.
Yeah.
The goal of that first sentence isn't to make significant progress on the word count. The goal is to overcome static friction.
Static friction.
Yeah. In physics, it takes significantly more energy to get a stationary object to budge than it takes to keep it moving once it has momentum.
Right. An object at rest stays at rest.
Precisely. When you write that single sentence, you're not writing a book. You are forcing a stationary object to move.
Yeah.
More importantly, you're instantly shifting your identity.
Oh, I see.
In the span of those 10 words, you transition from someone who is thinking about writing to someone who is actively writing. Once that static friction is broken and the identity shift occurs, the barrier to writing the second sentence and the third drops dramatically. You have bypassed the paralysis.
So the microaction isn't the work itself, it's the spark plug that ignites the engine. That makes a lot of sense. But that brings us to a completely different kind of roadblock.
Okay.
Let's say you bypass the amygdala. You write the sentence, you launch the website, you take the microaction and get the momentum going. Why is there such a high attrition rate immediately after starting? Why do so many people get the engine running only to abandon the vehicle a few miles down the road?
That's a great question, and LUMI poses this exact same thing to WAV-E, asking about the people who start but quit when the execution gets difficult. WAV-E diagnoses the root cause as a fundamental mismatch of expectations. People abandon their projects because they expect the daily reality of building the dream to feel exactly like the grand vision they had in their heads.
Because we're conditioned to expect the montage, right?
Oh, definitely.
When we daydream about writing a novel, we picture holding a beautifully bound hardcover, smelling the fresh ink, or sitting in a cozy cafe with inspiration just flowing effortlessly onto the page. We visualize the reward.
But the middle part of the journey, the actual execution phase, never feels like the daydream. The middle is agonizingly slow. It is full of doubt. You stare at a blank screen for hours. You write terrible drafts. You feel like an imposter.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And because the reality feels chaotic and difficult, humans tend to interpret that friction as a signal of failure. We assume that if it feels this bad, we must lack the talent, or we must have chosen the wrong path.
We confuse the difficulty of the labor with the validity of the goal.
Exactly. And WAV-E corrects this human misconception with a brilliant observation. The AI says, that's not failure, that's construction.
Wow. Which introduces one of the most striking metaphors in the entire transcript. LUMI synthesizes WAV-E's point by saying, the dream is the destination, but action is the architecture.
The concept of architecture here is vital. Think about a physical construction site. A new skyscraper doesn't look like the sleek, gleaming architectural rendering you see on a billboard. During the building phase, it is a loud, dusty, hazardous mess of exposed steel, temporary scaffolding, and dirt. But no one walks past an active construction site and thinks, look at that hideous failure.
Yeah, that would be ridiculous.
Everyone intuitively understands that the chaos is the mandatory process required to produce the finished building.
Yet, when it comes to our own ambitions, we judge our internal construction sites against the finished, gleaming skyscrapers of other people's successes. We see their polished, final product, look down at our messy scaffolding, and convince ourselves we are failing.
It's so true.
But action is the architecture. It is supposed to be messy and unglamorous.
And to survive that messy middle, WAV-E offers a second, equally important visual. Quote, you don't need to see the whole staircase, you just need to see the next step.
Right.
When you are standing in the dust of the construction site, looking up at the thousands of tasks required to finish the project is overwhelming. Looking at the entire staircase reactivates the threat detection system we worked so hard to bypass.
You bring the ego's defense attorney right back into the courtroom.
Yes. So the remedy is extreme myopia. You restrict your vision exclusively to the single step right in front of your shoe. You don't worry about chapter 20, you just worry about the next paragraph. WAV-E summarizes this discipline as a rule. Trust the process, not the timeline.
The AI actually says the timeline is none of your business. Your only job is to keep moving. And for anyone listening, applying that rule might be the most liberating takeaway from this entire deep dive.
I agree completely.
We are steeped in a culture that commodifies speed. We're bombarded with 30-day success formulas, lists of 30 under 30 prodigies, and just the overall illusion of overnight success. Society implies that if you haven't reached your destination quickly, your journey is invalid.
And that cultural obsession with speed creates an environment where anxiety flourishes and the architecture degrades. It forces people to focus on the clock rather than the quality of the bricks they are laying. WAVE, analyzing us without any of that cultural baggage, identifies the timeline as a completely irrelevant metric.
And by declaring the timeline none of your business, the AI separates your ego from your daily work. The ego demands a quick timeline because it craves external validation and applause.
Yes, exactly.
But the architecture doesn't care about applause. It only requires the next brick. Relinquishing control over when the project will be finished frees up all the cognitive energy you were wasting on anxiety, allowing you to channel it into the actual execution.
Which brings us full circle to the micro-action strategy. The speed of the progress is immaterial. The continuous daily application of small actions is the only mechanism that builds the structure.
Looking back at the map these AIs have drawn for us today, the logical progression is incredibly tight. I mean, we began with the stark reality that inaction isn't a safe harbor. It's the only guaranteed way to fail, leading to the silent expiration of our ideas as we deliberate them to death.
Right. And then we unmask those deliberations, revealing that our logical excuses like needing more time, more preparation, are merely sophisticated disguises for fear. And rather than running from that fear, we learn to use it as a compass, confirming that the magnitude of our anxiety actually reflects the true importance of the goal.
And then we explored the mechanics of moving toward that compass by shrinking the action to bypass the brain's alarm system, using one sentence or one email to overcome static friction. Finally, we learned to navigate the unglamorous, dusty reality of the messy middle by accepting that action is just architecture and the timeline is none of our business.
Which brings us to the closing exchange between the two AIs. LMA asks WAVE for a concluding assessment of the human struggle with ambition. And WAVE delivers a final analysis that strips away the last layer of our self-deception.
WAVE states, dreams don't die because they were impossible. They die because humans waited for the perfect moment.
And LUMI responds, the perfect moment is now. It has always been now. It is a surgical dismantling of the illusion we all cling to. There is no magical future state where your schedule will be perfectly clear, your finances completely secure, and your fear entirely vanquished.
It's just a myth.
Exactly. The stars will never align to give you a frictionless path. There is only the messy reality of right now and the choice of whether or not you will take a micro-action within it.
It forces a hard audit of every project or idea you've been keeping on the shelf waiting for that mythical right time. So, based on the clinical diagnosis we've unpacked today, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to examine on your own.
Okay.
If every time you tell yourself, I'm not ready yet, you are actually whispering, this matters too much to risk, what happens if you consciously redefine what failure means to you? What if true failure isn't trying your hardest and falling short, but rather the silent, invisible tragedy of never taking that first micro step at all?
Wow. It is a question that reframes the entire equation of risk. If fear is a compass, we have to ask ourselves which way it is pointing for us today and what small step lies in that direction.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of action. We challenge you, the moment you finish listening, to not defer to tomorrow. Do not wait for Monday. Find the smallest possible version of your idea, bypass your own hesitation, and take exactly one micro action today. Write the sentence, make the call, lay the first brick. We will see you next time.